On Wild Survival, mayday for a veteran fisherman as his boat sinks in the Gulf of Mexico. Will he be rescued in time?
I turned my bottom machine on, which reads the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, and I marked a huge object on the bottom of the Gulf, and I had figured that was the boat that it went down.
And a father and son's peaceful outing on an Arkansas trail suddenly turns violent and potentially deadly.
You're just thinking, this is just unbelievable what's happening. This deer's got your son up on his horns running away from you. I'm thinking, well, the damage adjustment's got to be, tremendous, because the deer has a lot of force and is moving real quickly.
This is Wild Survival. Corbin Burnson, and welcome to Wild Survival. An experienced Navy man takes his boat on a relaxing fishing expedition in the Gulf of Mexico. But miles from shore, his boat is taking on water. As the stern slips below the surface, he makes a last desperate call to the Coast Guard and hopes help is on the way. Naples, Florida is a tropical town on the Gulf of Mexico. With emerald palm trees and sapphire waters, Naples is a coastal fantasy land and a fisherman's paradise. That's exactly why Bob Brill made it his home. Bob's daughter Amy explains.
I oftentimes describe my dad with the character from Hemingway's Old Man and the Sea, because that's really what he's like. He's always all about boating and fishing and spending his time out on the water. True to form, on a crisp January morning in 1999, Bob Brill sets off for a fishing adventure aboard his beloved cabin cruiser, the Bob and Ray. It was real rustic, kind of just, when you got on it, you weren't on it for a leisure cruise, you were going out to catch fish. This day, the former naval man would navigate the Gulf of Mexico alone, a solitary ride for the determined angler. I've been out on the boat with him since I was tall enough to stand. So I remember talking to him about, what the weather was expected to be the next day, and it was going to be a little rough, and I was 6 months pregnant with twins, so we decided it probably wasn't going to be the best day for me to go. Patrolling the waters off Florida's coast that morning is Rocco, a 12-year veteran of the Collier County Sheriff's Department.
Yeah, it was early in January, and the morning started out nice, and it went from really nice to really bad.
As Deputy Marion navigates through Gordon Pass, a picturesque inlet at the mouth of the Gulf, he is jolted by an impassioned plea.
Mayday, 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 any Coast Guard.
I was out on the water under just my patrol area, and that's when I had heard on my VHF the call for help.
A desperate voice crackles on the radio. The transmission is scratchy and poor, but there is no mistaking the cry for help. A man's boat is going down. Deputy Marion quickly scribbles the boater's location on his hand.
And I punched in the number into my machine. We have units on the patrol boats. I punched the number in, and he was about 22 to 23 miles out from where I was.
The helpless boater's position is miles beyond Deputy Marion's authority.
Technically, our jurisdiction ends at 9 miles, which is the county line, but we're also cross-certified with customs. And in an emergency situation, we run a little beyond our boundaries.
Sheriff's Office, I'll be responding to the vessel going down from Gordon Pass.
Accelerating to 60 miles an hour, Deputy Marion races into the vast waters.
On this particular situation, I could hear it in his voice that something was definitely wrong. I've been on a lot of them, and I knew that this one sounded very, very serious. The only thing that went through my head was that I had to get out there and help him as quick as I could.
Wild Survival will continue. Deputy Sheriff Rocco is responding to a desperate mayday call from somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. A fisherman's boat is taking on water and sinking fast. Deputy Marion speeds to where he thinks the vessel is going down. Nothing but open water greets Deputy Marion as he scours the Gulf of Mexico for the lost boater. He has what he thinks are the correct coordinates for the sinking boat, but he isn't sure.
Probably took me 35 minutes to get out to that area. I got to the area and I saw nothing. Where my machine said I was there, I didn't see anything at all.
He switches on his bottom sonar to check the waters below. What he sees renews his spirits.
And I found a huge object sitting on the bottom of the Gulf, and I just assumed that it was his boat. So I knew I was in the right area. So I got excited, wanting to find and help this person that went down.
The deputy continues to comb the vicinity with no sign of the missing fisherman. Then,
I looked in the distance and I saw something floating. So I ran over there, and I believe it was a Ziploc gallon baggie that had like some napkins and a few things like that.
As Deputy Marion gathers the pieces of what he thinks is Bob's last adventure in the Gulf, an idea hits him.
So at that point, I took all the items, I put them back in the water, and I watched the way that they were drifting.
On a hunch, Deputy Marion turns his boat and follows the drift line, unsure of where it will lead.
I ran for about, I guess it was maybe 6 or 7 miles beyond where I had thrown all the items back in the water, and I saw Bob was floating up and down in the waves.
The tide has pulled Bob 6 miles west of his original position.
I'm freezing to death. I got you. I got you. He
looked pretty good, but he was shaking really, really bad. And I knew he was cold, and I had to get him warm.
Bob is rushed to a waiting fire rescue boat for treatment, and is soon able to tell about his harrowing experience.
As I was approaching the area that I was going to fish, my engine didn't sound exactly right. So I shut the motor off, and I went back and pulled up my engine cover, and the water was already up to the manifolds on my engine. There was no way the motor was going to start. It was too bad. I picked up the radio. I made my first mayday call. I did not get an immediate response. I went in the cabin, I put some extra clothes on, I put my life jacket on. I knew I was in a heap of trouble.
Bob fired his flare gun and then made 3 more frantic attempts to contact the Coast Guard. Finally, the weary fisherman reached a voice on the other end of the line.
Seatel White Tip, Seatel Fort Myers, which work, 1-1.
I don't think you realize the severity of the problem here. The boat's gonna sink. This will be my last transmission. Tell me someone's coming. The water was close to coming over the transom. I called the Coast Guard and informed them that I was sure this would be my last transmission, because once the water came over the top, that would be the end of my radio.
Then, instead of the boat being in the Gulf was in Bob's boat.
And I mean, all hell kind of broke loose when the water came over the transom. The boat made an immediate, 90-degree turn. I escaped through my windshield out onto the bow of the boat.
As the 25-foot cruiser sank, its captain held tight to the bow. When Bob released his grasp, he was alone in the chilly Gulf of Mexico. The water temperature was 58 degrees, and it was filled with stinging jellyfish.
The big thing that had concerned me was that I was cold, and I just shivering, and I could not stop shivering.
Already 23 miles off the coast of Naples, the former Navy midshipman was helplessly traveling westward, far from the location he had signaled to the Coast Guard.
They were looking where the boat was from the position that I gave, but all the time I'm drifting on out to sea.
Bob could faintly hear ships in the distance. Then he spotted Hope in the sky.
I seen a helicopter fly out, and I tried to wave at the helicopter, but it was to no avail. It did turn around and went back.
Bob had been treading water for 2 hours when he saw a familiar shape on the horizon.
I started screaming and waving my arm. You know, I'm over here. I'm at 3 o'clock, and I'm waving and trying to get the boaters' attention for them to come pick me up.
He was shocked when he looked up and saw that the arm rescuing him belonged to his boating friend, Rocco Marion.
He recognized me right when he stuck his big old arm out in the water. I was never happy to see anybody in my life like that.
He did make communication with the Coast Guard like you're supposed to do. He shot his flares, he put his life jacket on, he bundled up. Like he had said from his Navy experience, you know, all that comes in handy.
Bob Brill's calm actions and boating expertise led to his successful rescue.
There's a number of things, not losing my cool, which was kind of amazing because it was quite an experience. Absolutely very important that I had my life jacket on, and without a doubt, that big arm of Rocco Marion.
1 week to the day after Bob's accident, he purchased another boat and had it parked in his usual slip, ready for another adventure. If you find yourself going out on the open seas, here are some safety tips to keep you warm and dry. Make sure the boat has the proper safety equipment on board, including a working radio. Test the communication system prior to leaving shore. Wear a life jacket, or know where one is and be able to get to it immediately. And always, check the weather report before a day on the water. Being on dry land during a storm is the best way to stay out of trouble in the first place. Next on Wild Survival, a boy in Arkansas is suddenly and violently attacked by a deer.
He was snorting and making noise that you don't hear deer do. He was on the attack.